Hello everyone, my name is Moon and welcome back for more Umineko When They Cry, episode number 8. So last episode, I guess we are preparing for a big fight between the different characters, right? So anyways, let us just continue and let's see what happens today. In the arbor, the argument over whether they should surrender or fight continued without signs of stopping. Every now and then, a small fight would break out, fortunately ended up delaying Erika's third yawn. However, they didn't know how long they would have to continue this fake fight. Keeping this high level of tension going was physically stressful. The instant they tired out and the tension faded, Erika would probably demand a verdict. They had to constantly appear to be trapped and agitated. It was a battle of awareness and tension. Erika waited patiently. Now that she had tired of tea, she was watching MoonNova perform some magic tricks and seemed to be enjoying herself considerably. Even MoonNova, who was usually aloof from this world, was fighting. If Erika got bored and had a tantrum, an all-out attack would probably begin at once. He was putting his life on the line in the fight to buy time for Butler's group. As the fiercest leader in the argument, Beato wore off the quickest. She breathed heavily and her face was so pale, it seemed she might faint at any moment.
Beato! しっかりそのテンションを続けてたら体力が続かないわ。急に泣き出したふりをしてしばらく休んで。その間を私たちがつなぐわ。まだ大丈夫であるとも。やるぞ。もう一度大きく騒ごうではないか。行くぞ。さあ誰から行く？一番槍の欲しいものは。
ではゴーダ参ります。ここは戦うべきです。戦わずして敗北を受け入れることなど言語道断です。私は最初からここは戦い抜くべきだと申し上げております。
ちょっと待ってください。
Erika suddenly rose from her chair. MoonNova tried to coax her back into their seat, but Erika's attention was completely focused on those arguing under the arbor.
私は探偵です。聞いたことは録音するかのように記憶できます。
それは無論知っているとも。そなたは優秀な探偵でもあるからな。
あんたに興味ありません。郷田さん。私の質問に答えてください。
はい。私めが何かご無礼をいたしましたでしょうか。
ちょっとお待ちください。戦いを望まる者がいることもお忘れなく。私は降参が良いかと思います。私がここに訪れて一番最初に聞いたあなたの発言です。ですが今、あなたはこうおっしゃいました。ここは戦うべきです。戦わずして敗北を受け入れることなど言語道断です。私は最初からここは戦い抜くべきだと申し上げております。そう言いました。
いや、 そんなことも申し上げたでしょうか。
議論の中で意見が変わることも時にあるかと思います。
そうですとも。他の皆さんも先ほどからどちらがいいか迷っておりまして、時に意見を変えられることも。
いいえ、あなたたちの議論は一貫して誰も意見を変えていません。たった今、唐突に合田さんだけがその主張を逆転させました。しかも合田さんに対する他の人間からの発言を振り返っても、彼が主張を逆転させるに足るものがあったとは思えません。
An uncomfortable, moist wind blew by. Everyone was silent, frozen as though time had stopped. In that silence, Erica continued with a blank expression.
以上から導き出される推理は2つです。1つは、合田さんにもともと意見はなく、その場の雰囲気で適当なことを言ういい加減な人間であること。
True?
もう1つは、合田さんに限らず、そもそも誰も意見などなく、議論そのものがあなたたちの目的であるというものです。
それは考えすぎではないか。わらわたちは必死に今後の運命を議論している。時に普段は考えられぬ心変わりがあってもおかしくはない。
意味もなく議論を延長することに意味があるとすれば、時間を稼ぐこと。あなたたちは時間を稼ぐと何が有利になるのです？ラムダデルタ教の援軍がやってくるからですか？それも違います。なぜなら、あなたたちは先ほどから時折ラムダデルタ教やバトラに話しかけているのですが、それに対する返事が一度たりとも私の耳に聞こえません。以上すべてから考えて導き出される推理は一つです。
That Lady Lambda Delta and the Butler are not here now, and that these people have one Lady Lambda Delta's assistance, with Lady Lambda Delta and Butler probably planning to sneak into the City of Books. In which case, their goal is probably to steal back the Golden Key and Enje. And your plan was to act bait and buy time until their mission was complete.
ただ合田さんがセリフを言い間違えるだけで、フルドエリカにはこの程度の推理が可能です。
I mean, Goda was already panicking even last episode. Yeah, he was already panicking the way he was speaking. He was already saying that, "Sir, calm down. It was just an act." Like, come on, man.
いかがです？皆様方。
With a blank yet ruthless expression, Erica spoke these words and returned to her seat. Everyone else was frozen, unable to move. No one spoke. However, time was moving. As evidence, a bead of sweat dripped down someone's cheek, fell and hit the table with a tiny yet audible splat. Then frozen time shattered, and in the same instant, the white chair Erica had been sitting in broke apart. The stakes of the Seven Sisters, Purgatory, and the high-velocity rounds from the Chiester Sister Corps hit the chair at exactly the same time. And a few moments after that, Erica, sitting in that chair, faded and vanished. He was a fake.
早い、殺せ!
In an instant, Erica had moved to the spot behind the chair. Her expression remained as blank as it had been before. However, there was now something in her hand that hadn't been there. She has a sight now. As the 7 lightning strikes of the 7 sisters raced at her once more, she battled all of them away with her sight.
Demo, 紅茶は美味しかったですよ。ごちそうさまです。では、皆さんの意見は最初から統一されているようですし、改めましてお返事をお伺いしましょう。
Erica lifted her hand, the one that wasn't holding her sight.
よかろうぞ。わらわが答えよう。ここはわらわの我らの黄金鏡。土足で踏み入るならば相応の歓迎をしようぞ。つまりだ、上品に一言で言うとな、
全訪問、砲撃準備、目標、黄金鏡。
味噌汁で顔洗って出直してきやがれ。打ちやれ。
そう、ありがとう。それじゃあまたね。にゃー。
Burn Castle set down the receiver and crossed out yet another name on a list of Lambda Delta's notable friends. Something was wrong. Something was wrong. Not a single person she called had heard anything from Lambda Delta. They weren't just playing dumb. They really knew nothing about the strange ruckus Lambda Delta was trying to stir up. Even Burn Castle was starting to suspect that something was fishy.
黄金鏡にラムダとバトラがいない。
She tore the phone receiver from its stand. The number she dialed was short. It was probably an internal line. However, after listening to it ring several times, she slammed the receiver down, again finally managing to break the phone.
手の空いている猫をすべて集めなさい。大至急。鍵の警護にやった猫たちが誰も応答しない。ラムダ
Burn Castle, overwhelmed with emotion, kicked the table over. Then the room finally grew bright. It was like green sunlight. A bright green light waved about, giving the illusion that the green sun was rising and lighting up the room. It was a sign that Burn Castle's army had been given an emergency summons.
さあおいで、子猫たち。魔女狩りの時間よ。あの子はキャンディーの匂いがするからね、すぐに見つけられるわ。最初に見つけた猫には人の姿と魔女の称号をあげるわ。
What was now an emerald green nebula let out a roar of delight that shook the bookshelf cliff.
何かが追ってくるわ。
なんだあれは。緑の。
隠れて。バレたのよ。
The three of them frantically hid behind a bookshelf. The room with the key in it was straight ahead. They could see something glinting faintly in the darkness of that room. It was a glint different from anything else they had seen so far in the city. The color of the glint was gold. They had almost reached the golden key. However, if they went towards it, Burnt Castle would be right behind them, along with her vast swarm of familiars. In other words, they were trapped in a dead end. They already knew that the emerald green color came from the eyes of the familiars. However, it was almost beyond comprehension that this undulating green sun could be the same thing, and they could do nothing except stare in the wide-eyed shocked. The countless cats were passing through the ravine of the bookshelves from the very top to the very bottom. As they approached, they painstakingly checked the gaps between each book. However, even this mind-numbingly huge task was accomplished swiftly thanks to the sheer number of familiars. With the speed of a gust of wind, they carefully checked every nook and cranny. There was no way to hide from this green sun. That would have been as foolish as trying to hide from water on a sinking ship.
やり過ごせるの？
無理だ。あれじゃどこに隠れても見つかる。
Butler was just about to leap out from the shadows, but Lambda Delta grabbed him by the collar on an instant.
戦う気？
違う。ここに留まっても見つかるだけだ。なら前へ進むしかない。一刻も早く鍵にたどり着くんだ。
鍵を守る猫がいないわけないでしょ。私たちは挟み撃ちにされたのよ。私はエヴァおばさんを信じる。おばさんが私たちをここまで導いてくれた。きっとおばさんは見張りの猫たちもやっつけてくれているはずよ。
俺も同感だ。ここにいて見つかるくらいなら一刻も早くあそこにたどり着いて鍵を取り返そう。鍵さえ取り返せればもう誰もあの本を開くことはできない。
あそこにたどり着いて鍵を手に入れて、それであそこ袋小路よ。逃げ場ないのよ。分かってる？それは分かってるけど。
鍵は切り札になる。ベルンカステルにだって鍵は重要なんだ。一か八かな。鍵をカードに何かの交渉ができるかもしれない。
あのベルに交渉？あんた正気じゃないわ。
だがここに隠れてても絶対に見つかる。なら100億の中の一つの確率だとしても俺はそれにかけるぜ。鍵を手に入れそれを切り札に奴となんとか立ち回るんだ。
奇跡の魔女を相手にあんたは奇跡を祈るわけ？
天文学的数字の中に1を拾う。それが後ろ宮家の魔法ってやつだぜ。
私目がいいから教えてあげる。あの黄金の鍵を取り囲んでる魔法陣わかる？あれは簡単だけどなかなか堅牢な結界よ。触れば壊せる簡単な結界だけれど、でもね、どんな大魔女でも人間風情でも解くのにかっきり1時間をかけるというたちの悪い封印なのよ。
式典の進行上まだ1時間前にはなってない。つまり私たちは1時間稼がなきゃ鍵に触れることさえできないのよ。
エヴァおばさんはきっと見張りの猫たちをやっつけた時魔法陣も壊してくれたに違いないわ。1時間はかからないはず。
見る限りまだ魔法陣は健在ね。残念ながらエヴァがそうしてくれたとしてもそれは1時間以内の話みたいよ。
1時間なんてちょろいもんだぜ。少なくともそれだけ粘れば手に入るという明白なゴールがある。
そうね、いいじゃない、1時間の鬼ごっこ。私こわもてに追いかけ回されるのには慣れてるの。
あんたたち札付きのパー揃いね。ベルンとあの数の猫を相手に本気で鬼ごっこをさせてもらえると？
Can you even win?
確率が 1% でもあるなら
1% chance.
俺たちが絶対に
The difference in enthusiasm between the siblings who had everything to lose and Lambda Delta was immense. However, Lambda Delta was no coward. She was a great witch of the Senate. If she surrendered, she wouldn't be able to escape severe punishment, but she would be forgiven after a few hundred years. Why would she? After being thrown into a stormy sea while clutching a buoy that could save only her, decide to throw that buoy away. No living person could be as determined as those siblings who were already fighting for their lives. No one could blame Lambda.
ああ、もう本当にバカだわ、あんたたちは。仕方ないわね。1% よりもうちょっと確率が高くなる作戦を教えてあげるわ。ズバリ何だと思う？
The two siblings looked at each other. However, they both thought that any plan would be worth listening to, even if it would only raise their chances by 0.00001%.
生贄よ。ベルンは猫だから逃げる獲物は追うけれど逃げない獲物は殺す。それもネチネチといたぶってね。
最悪ね。
しかしそれが本当なら
生贄を一人じゃんけんで選びましょう。負けた子はベルンをたっぷり挑発して笑わせて殺されて1分1秒でも時間を稼ぐ。
Okay, we got 1 out of 3 chances. Who is gonna lose here? Lambda is gonna lose here.
それでいいわね。
Lambda or Butler? Yeah.
じゃんけんはいらない。俺がやる。
He's gonna do it. Okay.
エンジェとラムダは鍵の部屋へ行ってくれ。
ダメよお兄ちゃん、私がやるわ。
Because yeah, it's highly unlikely that NJ would do it. It's either one of the two.
元はといえばこれは私の責任。ベルンカステルの言葉に耳を貸し心を許した私の責任なのよ。だからあいつに一言くらい言ってやりたいのよ。
Both Butler and NJ decided to be the sacrifice and wouldn't listen to the other.
じゃんけんじゃないと決まらないでしょ。さっさと決めないとこの作戦も使えなくなるわよ。もうじき連中がやってくるわ。
分かった。俺かエンジェが生贄をやる。ラムダデルタは残った方を連れて鍵を奪ったら黄金鏡に連れ帰ってやってくれ。
譲らないわよお兄ちゃん。
ふざけやがって。たまには兄らしいことをさせやがれ。
時間ないわよ。じゃんけん一発勝負。私超パーだからそれにちなんで最初はパーからね。
Super paper.
いい？二人とも。
いいわ。
エンジェ、恨みっこなしだぜ。
せーの、最初はパ
It really was a stupid kid's game of rock, paper, and scissors. Since they'd promised to start with paper, this was a chance to make a surprise attack and use as something else. However, both Butler and Angie chose rock, and yet it wasn't a tie. Because in addition to those two rocks, was one person who chose scissors. I told you, man. I told you it's her or Butler. It's her. After staring stupidly at their fists and those scissors, they looked at her.
ちゃあ、最初はパーだからチョキ出して一人勝ちしてやろうって思ったのに、やっぱりパーはパー出してなきゃダメね。
There had been no reason for Lambda to join in on the game. This wasn't the time for a joke like that. Butler and Angie, each trying to lose, chose rock. Chose the scissors, or Lambda alone chose the scissors.
あんた、わざとチョキを。
お前に死なれたら、俺たちは黄金鏡に帰れないだろうが。こんなの無効だ。
ほら、これで大丈夫でしょ。
Butler had seen one of these before. It was a magic fragment like the one Erica had used before disappearing, which would allow one to cross a sea of fragment.
それがあれば、二人とも黄金鏡に帰れるわ。それに、これが一番の人選なのよ。あんたたちじゃ、ベルンを相手に数秒と持たないだろうし。私なら、1時間どころか、ひょっとしたら勝っちゃうかもね。あの子には借りがあるし。今度は私の勝ちってことにして、イーブンにしないと。アウェイは辛いわね。
Lambda Delta pretended to complain as she stood up straight.
じゃあ、行ってくるわ。私目立ちたがり屋だから、やっぱ感激者は無理だったわ。ごめんね、出番を奪っちゃって。あんたたちのゲーム、最後まで感激できないのは残念だけど、もう筋書きは教えてもらえたから見る必要もないわ。
ラムだ。
Then, with her broadest smile and wink,
あんたたちのハッピーエンド。もう先が読めちゃったから見なくてもわかっちゃうわ。じゃあね、また会いましょうね。あんたたちのハッピーエンドのクレジットロールでね。
待って！
Lambda Delta snapped her fingers and the two of them turned into confetti candies. She picked them up, took aim at the glint of the golden key, and flicked them away. That way, they should be able to reach the key without Burnt Castle noticing. Dang, what a terrible luck. What were the odds of them both playing rock against my scissors? Yeah, I know. It wasn't nice of me to test you like that. Sorry, you two. And then Lambda Delta's body was lit up by an emerald green light. When she turned around, the cat's eyes and Lambda Delta's met. Lambda Delta grinned and waved. There was a fierce roar and several bright flashes.
何事？
A chain of explosions flashed by one after another, enveloping Burnt Castle and her pack of familiars in an instant. They were multicolored fireworks. or rather multicolored candy that burst with a flash and scattered everywhere. Countless stick candies, sugar sculptures, cookies, and tarts flew in every direction, and each one of those split and exploded into hundreds of candies, each of which exploded again into a cloud of confeito. However, those sweets weren't sweets. The confeito was heavier than lead, harder than steel, and sharper than any blade. As colorful cloud exploded outward, it blasted the entire pack of cats into little bits. The emerald green glints were scattered everywhere and sparkled like the night sky. And among them danced a cloud of pretty candies that looked like they'd go well on a Christmas tree. It was sufficiently outrageous and beautiful and cute to mark the Great Witch Lady Lamnadella's appearance on the scene.
あら、ラムダじゃない。あなたとはパーティー会場で会いたかったわ。
愛してるわ、ベル。愛をささやくなら二人きりの方が素敵でしょ。
それはあんたの両手両足をもいだ後にゆっくりと聞かせてちょうだい。
With a jerk of her chin, Byrne ordered her familiars to attack.
私の愛しい愛しいたった一人の友人よ。両腕の肘から先、両足の膝より先。自由に食いちぎって構わないわ。それ以外には傷一つ許さないわよ。
The crowd of cats undulated again, reformed into a single mass, and became the emerald green leviathan that would swallow up any poor victims who snuck into the city of books. It was shaped like an impossibly vast whale. However, would it look like a whale from Lambda's perspective? She probably couldn't see anything except an immense mouth about to swallow up everything.
素敵。私をベルンの愛で飲み込んでくれるのね。
愛してるわ、ラムダ。あんたの手足をもいだらお尻から鉄串で貫いて私のベッドに飾ってあげる。そして毎朝目覚めのキスを、そして毎夜お休みのキスをしてあげるわ。
本当に素敵。じゃあ私もあなたを愛で包んであげる。
However, Lamnadelta's war cry was swallowed up by the glowing, writhing leviathan in a single bite.
ああ、素敵よ、ラムダ。あんたのその向こう水で命知らずでほんのりパーなところが大好きだわ。風。
At the same instant that Lamnadelta was swallowed and Burn Castle was sure of her victory, the latter felt a slight breeze of playing with her hair. The countless sweets that Lamnadelta had sent flying like fireworks, and which drifted about like the decorations at a Christmas party, were flowing. No, they were converging on a single point. It was like watching a firework run backwards. Countless sweets rapidly contracted around the vast, closed mouth of the Leviathan. A gigantic reverse explosion concentrated in the point inside it. Or perhaps it was more like countless candies showering the Leviathan from all directions like bullets. Inside that mass of green was a black swirl. That swirl was on a palm. On the palm of Lambda Delta, who wore a defiant smile, it was a mass of super gravity. All the sweets, the cats, the whale, and everything else was being sucked into that point and crunched. All of the candies Lambda Delta had scattered were getting sucked back into the black hole on her palm at unbelievable speeds. The reverse explosion of the oncoming candy whittled away at the Leviathan, crushing it inwards. With all her strength, Burncastle held her ground in midair, trying to resist this super gravity. For the first time, all traces of condensation or condescension had left her face. Even Lambda Delta's cocky expression was marred by the sweat trailing from her forehead. Because her power was so overwhelming, any victory had to be instantaneous. If either relaxed in the slightest, they would match each other's strength and get dragged into another dizzyingly long fight that could last for centuries. Neither of them had any desire to go through that again. So neither of them showed the slightest mercy for their most beloved friend. By now, the Leviathan had been completely crushed and compressed inside the black hole. Burncastle was the only one still holding her ground. However, a windstorm of candy steroids, like asteroid belt, repeatedly slammed into Burncastle, wearing away in her girl's form bit by bit. That thing flying to Burncastle's range of vision was a comet pelting straight for her with a massive present box at its core and a cloud of candy surrounding it. The candy comet wiped out Burncastle along with her scream. It burst into little bits, and within a blink of an eye, it was sucked back into a hole of super gravity. Once it was all gathered into one place like a gem, it began to spin rapidly. It was flattened by the centrifugal force, turning it into something whose shape resembled a galaxy. After swallowing all of the cats and their master, it now looked like a wiggling, flickering emerald green galaxy that floated just above Lambda Delta's palm. The pocket of supergravity kept compressing it further and further, until at the end it had become a single green, shining confeito. Then it fell, down onto her outstretched palm. Lambda Delta held the confeito above her head and peered at it. Then she pressed the confeito with her pink lips. gave it a light kiss, and bit down.
ベルンの味がしない。
Lambda Delta licked her fingertips, then turned to face the empty air behind her.
知ってたわ。愛しいラムダ。
ああ、愛してるわ、ベルン。
嘘よ。あんたがいつだって私に本気じゃないって知ってたわ。
じゃあ、本当に愛し合いましょうよ。お互い本気で。
ああ、愛してるわ、ラムダデルタ。嬉しいわ。本当に嬉しいわ。
愛してるわ、ベルンカステル。あなたを飴玉に変えて、永遠に私の舌の上で可愛がってあげる。
どちらが勝っても私たちは愛し合えるのね。それって本当に素敵だわ。それって本当に素敵。
さあ、愛し合いましょうよ。
With a crash, cracked lines appeared across the sky of the Golden Land. And then finally, the barrier of their Golden Land was breached by the fleet's assault. It was a bizarre scene, more ridiculous than anything anyone had imagined. It is ridiculous, right? The sky of the Golden Land shattered like glass, and a fleet of sailboats flew in one after another. They were crowded with goats pushing each other and spilling off the sides. A banquet. It wasn't some fancy metaphor, but a simple statement of fact. The overwhelming surge of goat troops came in like a tsunami. The residents of the Golden Land, who stood defiantly, were like a forgotten sandcastle on a beach. A fight between a wave and a sandcastle is not a fight. This was a banquet for the oncoming Vikings at a stand-up meal, the voracious, merciless goats. All those who could use magic fired it off at once. With a shout like a thunderclap, the goat tsunami rushed forward. Everything collided at once, and there was a brilliant and terrible explosion. Sparks and smoke, flying splinters and screams. For just an instant, the fierce magical cannonballs fired by Beato, Vergilia, and the Chiester sisters seemed to hold the goat tsunami in its tracks. However, their numbers were so great that they didn't even flinch. The goat wave continued to walk over the corpses that had been blasted away or which had fallen to their knees in weariness. The mound of corpses piled up, and still more goats were shot down as they tried to cross it. So that in a few seconds, it really was tall enough to be a tsunami.
あなたが築き上げてきた黄金鏡など浜辺に子供が残した砂の城に過ぎない。飲み込まれて消えてしま
え。ならばそなたは岸壁に打ち寄せる無力なさざ波を思うがいい。波に飲まれる砂の城、飲んでみろよ、わらわの城をよ。
Beato lifted her hands, telling the pair of battle towers that had been hidden deep into the ground that day of the glory had come again. The goat tsunami looked up at it in shock. After all this time, the tsunami that towered over everything wasn't them. A thunderstorm of rapid-fire ballista rounds leapt from the battle tower gun ports. The goats let out a confused scream at the fierce tempest that was bearing down on them. However, they saw something else too. In the sky, high above the tower, was a reaper astride a divine horse and backdrop by the moon. A massive spear the size of a tower in its hand. The great witch sitting on the horse by the reaper spoke.
お帰りなさい。ここはあなたたちの世界ではありません。行っちまえ、お師匠様
The heavenly spear pierced the ground. For an instant, it looked like some divine tower was sticking out of the ground. However, that was the very last thing those eyes ever saw. The circuit spear was the embodiment of heaven's wrath, and the strength to bury an unclean city in a single stroke was unleashed upon the pack of goats. With a massive explosion that resembled a volcanic eruption, goats were sent flying all over the place.
やるわね。さすが魔女だわ。でもどうかな？
敵はまだまだ来るわ。やっぱり飲み込まれるのは私たちなのよ。
にしちゃん、あんたたちは楽しそうだわ。
うわはははは。祭りは楽しまねば損ということだ。どうやら我らの出番がなくなるということはなさそうだぞ。みてえだな。燃えてきたぜ。
Yes, the crowd of goats truly was like a wave pressing in from the sea. You might be able to split a ripple on the beach with your feet, but you can't split the sea. Witches could. However, that meant the other side also had someone who could split seas. Suddenly, smoke poured from one of the two towers and the ground shook as it crumbled.
"あそこよ、もう一方の塔の上。エリカ、そうだよな。今度はそなたの番であるよな。
At the top of the other battle tower, Erica stood gracefully, wielding her scythe.
これで黄金鏡の魔女たちへの敬意には十分でしょ。魔法などすべてまやかし。 ミステリーに飲み込まれて必ず消えるファンタジーの砂の城。楽しかったですよ、魔法ごっこ。なんだか幼かった頃、近所のお姉ちゃんたちとこんな遊びをした気がします。だからもうこれでおしまいにしましょう。ここからはあんたたちが絶叫を聞かせてくれる番です。
Erica threw that pretentious pirate hat that she had been wearing this whole time into the sky. With the moon behind it, Erica's form, her afterimage, vanished from the tower's peak.
どこに？レーダー捕捉してます。あ、戦闘壁面。
Shaking with a wild, joyous laughter, Erica dashed straight down the tower. She swung her sight like a baton, and as she passed along the tower's wall, its gun ports, walls, pillars, and everything else was crushed, leaving a trail of smoke. So from the sidelines, it looked as though the line of smoke suddenly split the tower from top to bottom. The golden arrows of the Chester sisters, Thor, chased after Erica like golden threads in a sewing machine.
この化け物！縫われて刺繍になるにゃ！
グッドグッドグッド
Even the golden arrows couldn't catch up with Erica. Finally, Erica reached the bottom of the battle tower and empty cartridges were ejected from the golden bows.
ハゼロ、役立たずの塔でしたっけ？
Erica, who had now landed on the ground, slowly stood up and tapped the tower behind her with the handle of her sight. The tiny tap cut the final string that held the tower together, and the whole thing fell on itself with an earth-shattering crush. Once again, the dark tsunami rumbled forward through the rubble and smoke.
我こそは真実の魔女フルドエリカなり。今こそ真実にて黄金鏡を解体する。土は土に、幻は幻に。終わらせてあげますよ、あんたたちのハクチューム。さあさあ、思い出してごらんなさい、亡霊たち。本当はもうとっくに死んでるんだってことを。
The goat tsunami swallowed everything up. When she saw them sink under the black sea of goats, Erica guffawed from atop the debris of the tower.
さあ、殺せ殺せ、皆殺しになさい。全員の首を切り落として槍に突き刺して掲げなさい。怒号と真実の渦に飲み込まれて消え去ってください。
Oh my god, man, what is happening? Yeah, basically these fighting scenes that we're having is... remember the third episode? With... what's her name again? Virgilia and Beato. When they were doing their battle there. It was just pretty much just showing off their magic and stuff. It was kind of like... yeah, it's kind of like that right now. That we're getting with the fight scenes here. Like... come on. What? I mean, it looked earlier like maybe Lambda Delta or Burnt Castle's fight was gonna be good, but it was okay, I guess. Yeah, just, I don't know. I don't know what to say with this. Like, I did not expect this, yeah. As I said, I did not expect this. I thought going into episode 8, it's gonna be a much more calmer episode as it's the last one, but for some reason we're having this over-the-top battles for no reason. Yeah, like Enje, I don't know. We'll just see, right? We'll just see. So anyways, we are gonna continue this and do more of Umineko When They Cry, episode 8 in the next one. So I'll just see you then. Bye bye.